Hi everyone, my name is Karen and welcome back to my channel, Rather Be Reading. I'm here today to do my January wrap up, but first things first, sorry about the lighting. It's late afternoon / early evening here and the light is getting bad, but I wanted to film this now because I won't have time to film tomorrow, and then after I'm really not sure when I'll have time to film again, so I just wanted to get this out of the way so that I can hopefully get it up soon. And also I'm really sorry that my face is so red. I was out all day today and I'm quite sun and wind burnt, so sorry, but there's not much I can do about it. Now, I had a pretty good reading month this month. I read 11 books. I would have liked to maybe read a couple more, but I'm pretty happy with 11. And I actually did pick up another book, but I'll get to that later on. So let's just jump straight in. The first book I read this month was Tully by Paulina Simons. And I'm not going to lie, it was not a great start to the month. I really could not connect at all with the main character Tully in this book. This is about a girl, Tully, who is kind of on the wrong side of the tracks, and she's got these two best friends, and then one of her best friends commits suicide, and it kind of just goes on from there. But I just really didn't enjoy this book. I found it really hard to get into, and I think when it's even harder to get into a book when you know that that book is over 600 pages, like if it doesn't grab you immediately. And so I just didn't start off well, and I struggled with this book a lot. It also has not one but two love triangles, both of which I hated them. Both of the love triangles I just hated. I just wanted to throttle the main character throughout this whole book. I just really didn't enjoy it. Originally, I gave it a 3 stars, but after I was like thinking on it more, I just realized like kind of how much this book actually really did annoy me. I dropped it down to a 2 star. And a quick warning: this book does have quite a lot of triggering topics in it. So if that's something you're like not interested in, then definitely pass this one over. Although I would suggest passing it over anyway. But if it sounds like something maybe you would be interested in, could pick it up. I know that she is a good writer. This is the first book she published, and Paulina Simons also wrote the Bronze Horseman trilogy, which I know is supposed to be really amazing. And I've actually read another book of hers, which is like a thriller about a pregnant woman that gets kidnapped, and I enjoyed that. So I think it just kind of depends. She writes a really varying book, so maybe don't judge her on this and maybe pick it up if it does sound like something you might enjoy. The second book I read this month was actually a play, The Crucible by Arthur Miller. This is a play centered around the Salem witch trials, which is actually a subject matter that I find really interesting. So I did really enjoy this. I did only give it 4 stars just because I find the kind of a format of plays quite hard to get into, but I did enjoy it. An interesting side note, Arthur Miller was once married to Marilyn Monroe, which I didn't know before reading this. That was really interesting. And I am really interested in checking out the movie now with Winona Ryder in it. The next book I picked up was Almost Perfect by Kelly Denley. This is just a memoir about an Australian woman who has 8 or 9 children. I can't quite remember. And her and her husband decide, and they basically drop their lives and spend almost a whole year, I think it is, traveling around Australia, like camping around Australia. It was interesting. I enjoyed it. I gave it probably like 3.5 stars. It did speak to some interesting issues surrounding the mental health system in Australia, which I found interesting, and it did really make me want to travel Australia more. So yeah, it was enjoyable. After that, I picked up In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. This is a non-fiction book surrounding the 1959 murder of a farmer, his wife, and 2 of their teenage children in rural Kansas. It's told in the format of a story though, and I really enjoyed this. I was invested right from the get-go. I find the format of it being told as a story was just really engaging, and knowing that it had really happened just made it, you know, all that more horrifying. And I also really liked that Capote he just kind of told us the facts about the characters. He didn't ever really tell us what we should think or feel about them, which I really enjoyed. So I gave this a 4.5 stars. The fifth book I read in January was After Dead by Charlene Harris. Now, I originally thought this was a novella at the end of the Sookie Stackhouse series. It's not. It's just more like, I don't know if you can see, it's like an A to Z listing that literally just has like some small paragraphs, sometimes really small, as you can see, about all the characters basically in the series and what happened to them afterwards. I really didn't like this. It was really frustrating to me. I didn't remember 90% of the characters that they talk about in here, and the ones that I did remember, sometimes they had hardly anything written about them, which I just really didn't like. I already didn't like the way that this series kind of finished off, and then having read this now, it just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth. If you have read the series and were thinking about picking this up, I wouldn't bother. I only gave this 2 stars. Next, I picked up The Orphan Choir by Sophie Hannah. Sophie Hannah is actually the author of the Waterhouse Zayla series, which are like psychological thrillers, which I really enjoy those books. So I wanted to check this out. This is about a woman, Louise, who can hear a choir and see a choir that no one else can see or hear. This was okay. I gave it a 3 stars, but it really progressed quite slowly, despite the fact that this, really isn't very long. It's actually, well, it's just over 300 pages, but barely. So I would have expected to kind of progress a bit quicker than it did. It really didn't get going until right near the end. And I thought this was going to be a lot scarier than what it was, which it wasn't scary at all to me. But I do find her writing style, I do enjoy her writing style. And as I've said, I really enjoy the other series of hers. So I would perhaps check those out. And if this sounds like something you'd be interested in, definitely check it out. I gave it 3 stars, but it's not as good as her other works. The 7th book I picked up this month was Never Smile at Strangers by Jennifer Janes. I actually got this from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and Amazon Publishing for approving me to read this. This is an adult mystery thriller book about a 19-year-old girl who goes missing. It's told from multiple perspectives. I found it really enjoyable. I enjoyed the multiple perspectives. I really enjoyed the mystery aspect, of trying to kind of figure out who the culprit is. And I find these kind of books, when they're well done, really enjoyable. So I definitely enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars. My only real issue with this book, the thing that kind of frustrated me a little bit and kind of knocked it down a bit, was that sometimes the end of paragraphs were ended kind of mid-conversation, and then like the next chapter wasn't picking the conversation back up. Sometimes it was just kind of ended kind of as they use sometimes for a cliffhanger, which I just really didn't enjoy. Like, you don't have to create a cliffhanger by ending a conversation mid-conversation. So I don't know, that kind of frustrated me a little bit, but I did find it really enjoyable. And there's actually a sequel to this which has been published. It's coming out in March. But don't let that put you off if you aren't interested in picking up a series, because this book could definitely just be read as a standalone. I don't think you would need to read the sequel. I haven't read the sequel. I am planning to pick up the sequel in either February or March, but if you just wanted to read this as a standalone, you definitely could. Next, I began my quest to read more classics in 2015 by picking up Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I really enjoyed this. I just really enjoyed it, the story. I do find the writing a little heavy sometimes, but it doesn't detract from my kind of overall enjoyment of the story. I gave this 4.5 stars. I just kind of detracted at 0.5 star because I did sometimes find myself having to kind of read back over passages in kind of order to understand fully what was happening, but really enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to picking up more Jane Austen this year. The 9th book I read this month was The Girl in the Photograph by Kate Riordan. I'm not going to say too much about this because I do have a full video review for it, which I'll leave a link to down below if you want to check out. I gave it 4 stars, and I did also get this from NetGalley, so thank you to NetGalley and Penguin Books for approving me for this one. But yeah, if you want to see my review, just check it out down below. Now, next I DNF'd a book. I did not finish it. This is the 2nd time ever in my entire life that I have stopped reading a book. It's actually a really hard decision for me to make. It caused me a lot of anxiety, but I just really couldn't. I wasn't enjoying it at all. I actually really hated this book. I just couldn't enjoy it, and it's over 500 pages. I think it's like 550 pages, and I read to about page 150, and I think if it had only been like 300 pages and I was like, oh, I'm halfway through, I probably would have pushed through to the end, but it being like 550 pages, I just couldn't read anymore. And that book was Model Land by Tyra Banks. This book, you guys. The writing is awful. It is confusing. It is cliched. As I said, I read only to about page 150, and we'd only just kind of gotten to the point that you know what happens, that you're told in the synopsis. Now, it's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Like, if we already know that something's going to happen, and that's kind of where the story is supposed to jump off from, I want it to happen a lot earlier than 150 pages in. I didn't enjoy this. Like, let me read you guys a quote from this. This was on like page 5, I think, and already I was reading things and saying, ugh, really? Like, this is on, like, are these the kind of quotes that I'm going to have to be reading in this book? Let me just find it. So, sorry, this quote is actually on page 1 of the book, and I was already reading it going, what? It says, you begin your mornings staring at the fog, longing for the fateful evening when it will turn a golden yellow, and then, finally, like a push-up brassiere, lift. That is just an example of some of the writing in this book. I don't really know what else to say. I hated this book. If it sounds like something you would enjoy, if you look into it and it sounds like something you enjoy, I mean, pick it up, but I definitely can't recommend it to anyone because I couldn't even finish it. And like I said, that is really, really rare for me, as this is the second time I've ever done that. Ugh, I didn't enjoy it at all. Sorry. So I moved on from that by picking up Blood Oath by Felicity Pullman. This is another one that I got from NetGalley, so thank you NetGalley and Pan Macmillan. This is the kind of story that I think is best for me to describe by just quickly reading you the synopsis. So I'll just quickly read you the synopsis of my Kindle. A young woman left alone and destitute after the mysterious death of her mother plants a sprig of rosemary on her grave and vows somehow to bring the murderer to justice. But who can Yana trust with the truth? Even the villain Godric, who wants to marry her, and Hugh, the dashing nobleman, have secrets that threaten her heart and her safety. In a country torn apart by the vicious civil war between King Stephen and the Empress Matilda, Yana needs all her wits and courage to stay alive as she comes closer to those who are determined to silence her forever. So that's the synopsis. I enjoyed this a lot. I gave this 4 stars as well. Now, this is actually the first in, I believe, a 6 book series, which I believe have actually already been published as, I think, middle grade or YA. I'm not sure, and they're kind of out of print now, and they're being re-released as adult books. It's historical fiction. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I did find the main character really frustrating at times. She just sometimes made really bad decisions and just like jump to conclusions, but I did really enjoy the story. I do sense that there's perhaps a love triangle coming later on in the series, but love triangles, if done well, don't bother me. I really enjoy actually a good love triangle. It just has to be done well. I mean, sometimes, as we all know, love triangles are just done horribly in books, but if it's done well, I really enjoy them. So I am definitely looking forward to reading more in this series. And the final book I read in January was my favorite book of the month, and that was Winter Kill by Kate A. Borman. This is another one that I'm just going to quickly read you the synopsis because I would find this book really hard to describe what it was about. It just says, no one leaves the settlement if they want to survive. Emmeline knows this, but the trees in the woods are whispering to her, pulling her towards the wayward path. Inside the safety of the wall is a marriage she doesn't want and a boy she can't have. But outside, the Malmarquis lies in wait and the freezing winter kill is coming. I enjoyed this book a lot. I gave it 4.5 stars. It drew me in immediately. I read this book in kind of in 2 sittings. I just devoured it. I really, really enjoyed it. It was well written. I really enjoyed it. The only thing that bothered me was there are kind of 2 sets of people who have come from 2 kind of origins, and one is English speaking and one is French. So occasionally there is like French in this book, and sometimes it's not quite explained what they're saying, and I don't speak French. So obviously sometimes that was a little confusing, but for the most part it's explained just occasionally, and it didn't bother me too much. So now, I believe there is a sequel to this coming out. I don't know if it's coming out late this year or next year, and I'm really looking forward to picking that up because I really enjoyed this book, and it's definitely worth checking out if you want a good read. And that's everything I read in January. What was your guys' favourite book that you read this month? As I said, mine was definitely Winter Kill. Stay tuned for my February TBR, which hopefully will be coming soon. And that's all I have for you today. Bye, guys.